Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe. And Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to all the twos, almost all the twos. We're not going to get to celebrate all the twos, but it's 2022, everyone. Welcome to the new year. If you heard our New Year episode last week, you're probably well and truly into the flow of the new year, and we hope you're having a great time. And we have a really lovely episode for you today. Lots and lots of fun stuff to talk about. If you listen to our Christmas episode a couple of weeks ago, we're going to be talking about some of the books we got for Christmas, and talking a little about, and we want to know a bit more about what you got for Christmas as well. But before we dive in, we just want to say thank you to all our patrons, our wonderful patrons, for supporting this podcast. And if you're feeling guilty about having never been a patron of this podcast, now is the time to remove your guilt. It's very simple. You just go
unburden yourselves.
Unburden yourself. For all those people who've been listening to us, tell us they've been listening for 5 years and have never supported this podcast to the patronage, we would love to invite you into our wonderful group of patrons. So do pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. And again, thank you to everyone who's part of the academy that makes this podcast possible as well. Mr. Stay.
Hello, sir.
An extended Happy New Year for you. I know we were already Happy New Year last week, but how are you doing, sir?
That was a fake Happy New Year because we recorded it in the middle of December. It's an entirely different thing when you step into 2022, which I'm still getting my head around. Yeah, very good. Hit the ground running. I took Christmas and Boxing Day off, but I was writing pretty much every day because I have to. I've got a book to deliver next week, and I'm working on rewrites of a script. And I was editing a client's book, so I can't really slow down.
This is the life, but yeah, right? This is the life of a working writer.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain, mate, because it's. I love doing it all. It's all good fun. So I'd write for maybe half an hour in the morning, and then stock up on chocolate and all the other good Christmassy stuff. But yeah, it's been a lovely Christmas. And yourself, sir?
Yeah, I had a great time. We were just saying before we went on air, just the thing that always catches me out is how quickly that kind of passage of time that happens just before Christmas and just after Christmas, that lovely week when a lot of people, and I say this, with thoughts out there for everyone who had to work, full on over Christmas, all the emergency services and people who have, looking after, say, aging parents or whoever it might be, or partners. But there's a beautiful time I find between Christmas and New Year where I feel that the Western world slows down, and there's this kind of like more easy energy that happens, and you can do things like do a puzzle and things like that because there's not this kind of sense of like the world is kind of rushing past you and you're not keeping up with it. I love that. Is that what retirement is like? I'm wondering. Is that what retirement must feel like? I don't know. Who knows? Something to ponder. But
I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. But we were going to talk a little bit about books, weren't we? And books, because we talked about books that we got in our childhood. But I did see quite a lot of posts on your social media over Christmas, Mark, about books that you got for Christmas.
Well, for a moment, I thought Santa had swapped our stockings, Mr. D. I thought these two books have got Mr. D written all over them. The first one I got, which is absolutely gorgeous, it's called You've Got Red on You, and it's the story How Shaun of the Dead Was Brought to Life by Clark Collis, who's a very good film writer. First of all, look at it. It's gorgeous.
It looks amazing.
End papers, lovely chunky hardback.
Wow.
But it's not just about Shaun of the Dead. It goes into the whole thing with Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Jessica Hines, how they work together on Spaced, how they all met each other. And then where Shaun of the Dead came from, the whole shooting thing, the whole shoot, the post-production, the festivals they did afterwards. And then it sort of dips into Hot Fuzz and all these other movies as well. So you dive into this, because I know you're a big fan of Space. Dive into that. That is an absolute belter.
Well, I'm a big Simon Pegg fan as well, and the stuff, all that, the trilogy. What was it? The Cornetto, I think.
Cornetto trilogy.
Cornetto trilogy.
Yeah. Well, they talk about the fact that because they had a cornetto in the first one, that wasn't planned, but at the premiere, Cornetto gave them all free cornettos. And they're sitting there eating them going, we should have cornettos in the next one. And that's it's as simple as that. That's how it all came about. And the other one I just finished last night, and this was given to me by a film director I know called Ollie Blackburn, who's working on a book, actually, an extraordinary book that he's going out to agents with soon. But he's a great film director. And he gave me this. It's called The Hitmakers. And it's how to succeed in an age of distraction, both by Derek Thompson. And it's just talking about what makes a hit. And it talks about music, talks about film, talks about novels. There's a whole chapter in there on 50 Shades of Grey, which is absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. There's a lot of that joining the dots after the fact, which is, is a bit, but it just basically, in short, people like the same but different. So if you're going too different, you've got to look for that Goldilocks zone, and timing is everything, perseverance, basically everything we've talked about for the last 5 years on the podcast.
The entire podcast.
But
I love it.
It's an interesting book.
I do love books like that. I love books that they retrospectively look back, almost like historically, don't they, and see what happened, and then try to kind of look at all of, and like you say, join the dots. Because once you understand how that model works, which is what we've been really talking about in the bestseller experiment, and kind of intrinsically, we kind of have like delved so deep now, we kind of know what some of those dots are and how they join. But I think it's such a valuable thing to kind of look back and see what happened, look back. I'm doing it currently, a book that's talking about like, technology and COVID and all these different things. And again, looking back over the last 20, 30 years and then jumping back 200 years. It's incredible what you can draw in terms of parallels of human behavior and all the things that are constant within that and the things that don't change, such as like the way that we react to things as people. So yeah, I'll have to delve into that. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything. It's not going to guarantee you're not going to read that and suddenly you're going to write a bestseller. But I think the more you listen to this kind of advice on our podcast, the more likely you are to hit pay dirt. Because I think once you start thinking, what is it that people like? What is it that people are looking for? What can I offer them? That the whole thing of writing to market, it's not writing to market. It's writing with a voice. It's right, but. Thinking about who's reading your book, it's complicated stuff, but it's absolutely fascinating.
The thing I love about it is that, like we've always said, there's no formula to it, but the more that you delve into it, the more you get like a macro level understanding, which affects the micro, affects when you sit down to write each day without sometimes even realizing it. It's kind of seeped into your mentality. And I mean, I'll say this out loud, you're proof of that, Mark, because the things that you're currently doing and the hit rate you're getting now, is success rate with the books and the films.
Don't jinx it.
Well, no, I don't. No, you don't have to jinx it. Seriously, like you've put in 5 years of studying this with me. Like we've literally, we've gone deep. And I know a lot of people have gone with us on this and they've done as much studying as we have. But I think there's a correlation between that and the likelihood of gaining something which is popularized in our world today.
No question whatsoever. This podcast has improved my writing so much. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And just the privilege of speaking to writers every week and being just that part of that conversation and sharing it with everyone and talking to people on the academy and yourself. It's it's been commented on by collaborators of mine,
really?
Oh,
interesting. Very interesting. Well, there you go, folks. There's total proof. So you're listening to us now. You're in the right place. You're in the right place. And what could this mean for your 2022 if you come with us each week on this journey of, who knows what's going to happen, Mark? The only constant in life is there is nothing permanent. We don't know what we're going to experience this year. We don't know what amazing things we're going to discover, what events are going to happen in our lives and the lives of people that listen to a podcast, the readers and the writers out there. It's all to play for, folks. But if you want to be in it, then tune in each week and see what crazy things we're talking about and what we're up to. And talking of things that are never they're always changing. This week we have a returning guest.
Yes, Simon Beckett, who I'll put a link in the show notes. He first spoke to us in episode 190, which is called One Moment That Changed Everything and set him off on his career. But he's back. Simon Beckett is back. He's a #1 international best-selling author of the David Hunter series. Books have been translated into nearly 30 languages. He's a Sunday Times top 10 bestseller, sold over 10 million copies wide world. Won all kinds of awards. He's a former freelance journalist as well. But in addition to the David Hunter series, he's done various standalones. But he's back with a new series, which is The Lost, which features a new character called Jonah Colley. And we discuss the challenges of starting over with a new series character, opening with a really shocking scene, and why his first drafts are generally disasters.
Marvellous stuff. Let's delve deep with Mark chatting with Simon Beckett.
Simon Beckett, welcome back to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks, how are you?
Very good, thank you for asking. And we're here. You're returning. I mean, last time we spoke, we were talking about body farms and all kinds of wonderful grisly stuff. But you've got a brand new book and a brand new series, The Lost, which is a change from your regular David Hunter series, featuring a new character, Jonah Colley. What can you tell us about this new series and the new book?
It's a little different to the David Hunter series. Jonah Colley's a different character to Hunter because he's a Metropolitan Police firearms officer. And he's contacted one evening out of the blue by somebody he's not heard from for a number of years, who asks for his help and wants to ask him to go out and meet him at a place called Slaughter Quay, which is a warehouse in an abandoned warehouse in a rundown quayside in London. Jonah's obviously got reservations about this, but he agrees to go because the person who's called sounds pretty desperate. They've obviously got quite a lot of history. And when he goes there, he finds quite a horrific scene. There's been people have been killed, basically, and without going into too many details, Jonah's attacked and badly injured himself. Subsequently, as he's recovering from this, it obviously has quite a traumatic effect on him. He doesn't really know what's been going on in the warehouse. He's no idea what was happening there. But increasingly, he begins to think it might have something to do with his own past, because 10 years before, his young son disappeared. This is something Jonah's always blamed himself about. And the more he starts looking into what happened at the warehouse, the more he starts thinking that in some way it might be connected with the disappearance of his son 10 years ago, which obviously then makes him very, very driven to get to the truth of what's actually going on.
Fantastic stuff. And it's had a great reception, terrific reviews so far, but there are lots of changes and challenges with this new book. You're changing your lead character, Jonah Colley. Forgive me, I called him Johan Colley. That's my typo in my notes here. And you've got a new publisher, Trapeze. You've got a new editor, Sam Eads, who's been a guest on the podcast a few times. Say hello to Sam. So all change. I mean, part of the thing with a series is a lot of the world building is done. You kind of know the precinct and the character. This was kind of ground one for you. So how difficult was that?
It brings its own challenges, but to be honest, so does writing the next book in the series, because although you've got that familiarity, I think the danger is with the series, certainly, from my perspective, you don't want things to get stale. And I certainly wouldn't want David Hunter to become stale, either for me or for the readers. So after the sixth book, the sixth Hunter, which is The Scent of Death, I felt I'd tied up quite a few loose ends that had been carried over from previous novels, and it seemed a good point to actually try to do something different, because David Hunter, I enjoy writing the character, and I will be continuing to write the character as well. But he's a scientist, he's a forensic anthropologist, he's a very insular character, which means that there are certain situations that he wouldn't do well in, and that certain plots, if you like, that I can't really explore through the character of David Hunter. And he felt like it was time to just try doing something a little bit different. Jonah Colley, obviously, is a police officer. His firearms, he's used to high pressure situations. He's more physically competent, I suppose, but he's still flawed. He's still vulnerable. He's not a Superman or an action hero by any means. So I found him an interesting character to write, but he was the sort of character who was also going to be different to Hunter. So there are advantages and disadvantages. So you've got to start from scratch, decide what sort of character he is, decide on the backstory, who's surrounding him. But that's, to some extent, that's the same in any book, because with the Hunters, each one takes place in a different location. So to a degree, I have to do that anyway because it's always going to be new characters. There'll be one or two returning ones sometimes, but generally it's new locations, new settings, new characters for Hunter. So in that respect, it wasn't such a departure. I mean, obviously it was, was a bit, but it wasn't such a culture shock to me.
That's really interesting you're talking about backstory there, because I sort of broke off from making my own notes about characters in the thing that I'm writing, and this is about a band. So I'm doing a kind of, you remember those Pete Frame that band family histories kind of thing, and just doodling down notes. How does backstory start for you? Do you do little bios, or do you just think about them thematically, or do you think of them as give them somewhere to go? I mean, where does a character first come from for you?
It varies, to be honest. With the character David Hunter, I spent a lot of time. I got a rough idea for the story, but because I knew I'd been to the body farm and seen what American forensic anthropologists do, and I wanted a British one. So it was a case of, okay, where does this character start from? With The Lost, the starting point for the book was I've got the opening scene, the opening chapter in the head, which is where someone at this stage, and I didn't know who it was, it was a police officer, I knew that much, goes into an abandoned warehouse expecting one thing and finds something very different. And I knew it was going to be quite a strong scene, quite potentially, a shocking one. And then for me, it was a case of, okay, well, what's going on there? And it was a case of thinking what sort of character was going in there and then why. So I find it difficult. Well, I don't find it difficult to differentiate between plot and character because I can't really. I think for me, the plots and the characters are so intertwined that, characters and plots, they develop along, in parallel, in tandem to each other. And I think it was certainly that way with Jonah, because as the story began to take form in my mind, so did his personality and his character. It does tend to be different. I don't think of a plot and then shoe on a character into it, and equally I don't think of a particular character and then think, okay, well, what can they do? It has to be. It's sort of more of a natural development from to work on them both together.
So one informs the other. So is it kind of that situation where, because what I love in a character is often they're the worst person to deal with this situation. They might be a professional, a doctor or a cop or whatever, but there'll be something inherent in them that makes it really, really difficult for them to cope with a particular challenge or a situation. The flaws of the character, how aware of you of those?
Yeah, very aware, because I think they're what makes a character interesting. If you read about a character who always got everything right and could always, come back with the right put down, handle every situation well, then where's the tension and the drama in that. And plus, it will be unrealistic because we're all flawed characters. So it's a case of you don't want to make them too wounded or whatever, but they've got to have something going on in their lives because everybody does. And it's a case of okay, for this particular character, what's going on with them and what's happening with them. And for Jonah, obviously, a big thing is what happened to his son. That's something he's struggled to deal with, and in a different way to, say, David Hunter who'd also got past a tragedy in his own life. But they deal with it in different ways. And I think for Jonah, working his way through this, when he suddenly finds himself in this situation, it changes everything because all the underpinnings he's trying to rebuild his life on, and suddenly you realise it's like they're built on quicksand. And for a writer, that gives me somewhere to go and things to play with and develop. And hopefully for readers, it gives additional interest.
Excellent stuff. Was there a point where it all clicks into place for you when you're developing a story? Do you feel like you get a sort of halfway through and it starts to take shape, or do you end up with a kind of a messy first draft? How does that work for you?
My first drafts are generally disaster zones, to be honest. I generally, it's funny because I've been talking to one or two people, and I think it's the same thing. It tends to be about the 25,000, 30,000 word mark for me, where you hit a stumbling block. And there's been times in the past where I've not actually been able to get past that, and I've had to start from scratch. I think I got past it with this one, but it's a case of there are a series of small eureka moments, because as you're going on, it's just okay, what's happening now? This isn't working, and then you get past that, and you get yes, great, and that carries you on for a while. The momentum from that keeps you going until the next one, and then there's the next one and the next one. And it's just part of the process. I mean, it used to bother me because I used to want everything to go smoothly, which is, yeah, exactly, pretty unrealistic. So when it didn't, it would sort of like knock me back a little bit. Now I know it's not going to, and when I do come across all these stumbling blocks, you just think, yeah, okay, let's work out what to do to get around it. So there's no hard and fast routine for me. I wish there was. It's a case of the first draft is rough, very, very rough. And often it's not until I get to the end that I know, things do fall in place. But that means then that I've got to go back and change things in the preceding chapters, for the start and finish the telling, because it develops so much as I'm going along. And by the time I get to the end of the first draft, the first few chapters aren't necessarily going to fit.
Abandoning a book, even if I say only 25, 30,000 words in, which is a lot of hard graft, abandoning a book is quite a big decision. How many times have you had to do that?
Quite a few, to be honest. I mean, with one book, it got to it was. I got to the end of it basically, and then it wasn't working, and I knew it wasn't working, and I basically bitched the entire thing and started from scratch. That was a really uncomfortable position to be in. That was, particularly when you've got deadlines. That wasn't good. But it's happened. It's happened quite a few times, and I think on every book there's always sections I get rid of. There's always part of it you think, yeah, that's not working. That needs to go. So I'm quite a wasteful writer. I know some writers can just sort of get to the end of the first draft and then it's almost like, not quite a tidy up. But for me, it's like the first draft is almost like the skeleton. No pun with, intended. It's the skeleton, what's going on. And then it's a case of breathing a sigh of relief and, okay, now I can actually start getting things, fleshing it out properly and, making sure all the joints work.
And of course, these being thrillers, you've also got the added element of a mystery at the center of this, or some kind of, revelation or detective work. How much of that are you outlining ahead, or are you just, discovering that as you write?
Again, it tends to be both. I outline as much as I can, knowing full well it's going to change and develop. There was one of my books, One of the Hunters, and I was really confident because I planned it out really thoroughly, and I thought everything was going to be, it was pretty much there. I'm just going to write it, and then as soon as you start writing and things start to develop, you think, yeah, that it's fine having a plan on paper, but when you actually come to writing the story, it doesn't necessarily work out like that. So I like to have an idea where the end point of the book is. For a series, I will often like to have, certainly with this Jonah Collier one, I've got an idea of which plot elements I want to carry through into future books. And so I'm sort of keeping an eye on those as well as I'm writing. But then as to actually how things play out and pan out and fit together, that always changes as I'm going along. So there's an awful lot of leeway and give and take and chopping and changing things as I'm writing.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to take you back to where it all started, basically, because I was looking at your bio, and it's interesting. You've been teaching, but you were also installing cavity walls. Was stories always ticking over in your mind when you're doing these jobs? Were you finding time to write while you were doing those jobs as well? Not
for a while. I mean, I've always enjoyed writing, but I was in my late 20s before I decided. It became a strong enough urge for me to think I wanted to try and make a serious go of it. There was I did an English degree, and there was a creative writing element in that which I really enjoyed. But when I finished that, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And without that sort of structure of, exercises being set, I didn't feel I got anything to write about. So for a number of years, I didn't write at all. And yeah, I did, various manual jobs and things like that, played in bands. And gradually the idea that I wanted to write got stronger. So I started, doing things, when I got home at night and there was spare time. But then I got a mate phoned up out of the blue one day and said, he was teaching in Spain, teaching English as a foreign language in Spain. He said, there's a job going, so, do you fancy it? And it was either that, this was in sort of December. So it was either that or carrying on another winter working up the ladder. So I went over to Spain and I thought, well, this is going to be, I've got a lot of free time. And that was quite a big turning point for me, because it gave me the time and the freedom to think, all right, if I'm going to make a go of it, this is the place to start and the way to start, when I have got this sort of opportunity. So yeah, it would have been late 20s before I actually settled into the idea that, this is what I wanted to do.
And you spoke about that idea sort of ticking away in the background. Was that one of those ideas that just wouldn't go away, that sort of compelled you to write?
No particular idea, no. There was no one story that I was wanting to tell. And I think that was part of the problem, because I didn't know what sort of writer I wanted to be or what sort of stories I was wanting to tell. I enjoyed writers like Ian Banks. The Wasp Factory, I read that, completely bowled me over. But also, from when I was doing an English course, people like Hemingway and, things like that, which are... So there are all these different things. I didn't have anything concrete in mind. It was just I wanted to tell stories, and that was about it. I wanted to write stories, but it took me a while to get one that got the legs really to become a novel. And even that wasn't published anyway. So it was the first one. Nothing happened with that. So these things take time.
They certainly do. What was your writing routine when you were working? How were you working around the day job?
Again, it would be sometimes I'd come in at night. My first published novel, actually, I had that idea came to me, and I was sort of thinking about it while I was working. And I got back one night and just got a pad and paper out and started writing it. It doesn't always happen to me like that. So it was a case of just working around when you can, because I started working as a freelance journalist when I came back from Spain as well. And so that was the bread and butter money. So the novels had to be working around that. So it was weekends, spare time, days off, when I could fit it in, really. And then but gradually the emphasis changed, so the novels became more and more important. So I was wanting to spend more time on that and less on, the other things. So there was a sort of winnowing out process, I suppose. Now,
it's interesting. We've had a few journalists on the show who have gone on to become writers, and it's always fascinated me that thing of doing two jobs. You have your day job and you have your novel writing. And if your day job is writing constantly, did you ever have days when you get to the end of the day and you think, oh God, more typing? Were you able to separate the two?
Yeah, because I enjoyed them both, and I think that is pretty key. I wasn't trained as a journalist; I was a freelance. I had no training at all, so it was quite exciting doing that and getting commissions and then going and doing all these different things, which was fantastic. But then equally, it was good then to have a bit of clear space to think, okay, this is time I've got now to work on what I'm wanting to do as well. So as far as I was concerned, the two, dovetail very, very nicely. I didn't, and there was no real. Obviously, if you've got a deadline, got a commission, you've got to get it done. Then the books have to take a back seat. But that aside, it's they didn't get in the way of each other.
And journalism is not a profession, full of millionaires rolling around in cash. This is, it's very kind of hand to mouth. As you say, you're getting commissions, and sometimes they can take ages to pay. It's how do you keep yourself motivated? How do you keep yourself going in those sort of lean years when there's not tons of money coming in?
Well, I mean, I think one motivation is that there's not tons of money coming in, so you've got to hustle for it, basically. But yeah, I mean, that is a big incentive because you've got to pay the bills. And at the same time I was doing that, a lot of my friends who've got into stable jobs were doing really well, so they were sort of pulling ahead. Which, and there were times you think, am I doing the right thing here? But it was what I was wanting to do. And again, I come back to that, I was enjoying it. I used to get a real buzz when I get a commission. And then you get the nervousness about setting off somewhere to go and to interview somebody, to hoping everything worked out, all the arrangements worked out, then hoping you would make a decent piece. So, and it was a short-term thing. So that was quite a good antidote, if you like, to what happens when you're writing a novel, which is where you're in it for the long game. So for me, it was... I didn't really need any more incentive other than that. It was paying the bills on the one hand and enjoying it.
And when you're writing that first novel, were you telling friends and family about it? Were you saying, I'm writing a novel, or was it something you kept to yourself?
I kept it to myself. Friends and family, close friends and family knew. But I played in bands, and that was different. That was great, because if you play in a band, you can give people demos, you've got gigs. It's much more of a public thing, whereas if you're writing something, particularly when it can take, a year or two or whatever, and there's nothing there to show people, everybody tends to think, I mean, I'm from a working class background, and you think, people are just going to think this is being unrealistic. So a lot of people didn't know I was writing. I mean, it's quite funny when, I bump into somebody every now and again, and the first they knew that I was writing at all would be they'd seen something or seen one of my books or something. I had no idea. So it was a big relief when, it took years, but when my first novel was accepted, and I could say to people, "Yeah, I've done this. I'm a writer now." And it felt like that was great, because I'd never really felt comfortable calling myself a writer when I wasn't published.
Right. Yeah, there's a kind of stigma about that. And what's coming next? Are there going to be more Jonah Colley stories? Are there going to be more David Hunter stories? What's coming next from you, Simon?
Well, yes to both. I'm not going to actually say which one I've got lined up immediately next, because I never do, basically. I'm always a bit...
right. And
I don't know if it's not wanting to jinx it or whatever, or just, but until things are, well underway, I don't really like talking to them. But yeah, I like, Jonah Colley's certainly the first in the series, and I certainly plan to, got more David Hunters as well. So see what happens.
Excellent stuff. And is there any more TV on the way? Where There's Smoke was adapted into TV series. Is there any sign of any TV or film on the horizon?
There is actually nothing I can actually talk about again yet. But things are heading in the right direction. So hopefully, before too much longer, there'll be some news. But there's nothing until it happens. You can't really say sure anyway. But fingers crossed. And yeah.
Indeed. Well, Simon, thank you so much for speaking to us today and for coming back on the podcast, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. It just goes to show you can sell 10 million copies of a book and still ditch an idea. Isn't that amazing? That blows me away. But yet we know it's true, right? We've heard it before, and here's living proof again.
Well, I think for him as well, it's part of his process. If you've done it enough times, you get 25, 30,000 words into something. That's part of the discovery. That's part of finding out who your characters are and the situations. And you get to that point, you think, okay, I've funneled down this way, but actually, if I step back, I know who these people are. I know where to go now. So I think we've had a few writers, if you're doing this for the first time, that must be absolutely terrifying and mortifying. But if you've done it a few times, it's part of what you do. So yeah, I think it's all part of the, rather than calling it pantsing, people sometimes call it discovery writing. And I think that's
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. I think we've discovered a new badge of honor. We know the ultimate badge of honor is the first 1-star Amazon review. We know that. But the new kind of badge of honor that we need to pin to every writer listening right now that's finished a book and discovered, maybe even on their second or third book, maybe their first book was a really kind of like a flow right, it just kind of happened. Or maybe the first book is something which was a real struggle, but they got to the end. But a badge of honor is by getting to the end, like you say, you discover that this is part of the process. You discover that it's very, very rare that someone writes from word 1 to word whatever, 80,000, and doesn't have a point where they get completely stuck, a point where they're like, this is absolute crap. What am I doing? Why am I wasting my life doing this? And I think it's worth writing that first book just to get that badge of honor, because the experience alone of knowing that knowing that you are potentially going to hit the rails and wonder what you're doing and where you're going to go. Question is, Mark, here's a big question. And I always ponder this. How many people listening to this podcast, listening to us right now, out of 100, say, are feeling that moment or are about to feel that moment or have got past that moment but not finished their book, that haven't actually experienced? Do you think, I mean, because I do wonder if it's like 80% of people in the world that write books that have not yet realized that this is part of the process, how many people stop writing as a result of it?
It's I don't know. I mean, honestly, don't know how many, but it is one of these things that the more you do it, the better you are at coping with it, and you recognize it for what it is. Hello, my old friend.
Old friend, exactly.
And then you're able to cope with it, and it just becomes, it just becomes, Blofeld or whatever it is. So,
becomes your personal antagonist.
Yeah, bête noire. Yeah. So
I love it. So we need to give this. We need to de-terrorize this idea by giving it some ridiculous notion. I mean, it could be your Blofeld. I like that idea because that's a fictitious character. But that has to. We have to give it. We have to lighten the load for people here. What could we create for people that is the badge of honor?
The evil Count Procrastination. No, let's have a think.
We've talked about muddy middle before, haven't we? We've talked about the muddy middle. That came up with the Grant Faulkner interview that we did, the NaNoWriMo originator.
Yes.
Muddy middle was kind of like an idea. But it's this idea of not so much hitting the muddy middle, it's the badge of honor you get by getting past it and then recognizing it as part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we should put it out to socials.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of it at the moment.
Let's put it out to socials. If you've been there and you've done it and you recognize this is now your old friend, we want a name for this so that we can caricature it and then we can reference it forever and ever on this podcast.
Dr. Doubt has come to visit. I've defeated Dr. Doubt, the evil Dr. Doubt.
I mean, some people call them vomit drafts, which to me, I love the concept of it, but the actual visual I get of it is just horrible. It's like, because it's literally spewing your words out onto paper. But I mean, that is an extreme case of what a lot of people feel. I mean, even Simon said, the first draft, absolute, like shockingly terrible. It's so rare that we don't hear that. But so if you've been there and you've done that and you've given it a pet name, let us know what it is, and we'll historically like characterize it on the podcast for you. The other thing that I found was really interesting about Simon. I mean, he referenced the 25,000 to 30,000 word kind of range where this typically happens, where the hard, it's like the 25th mile of the marathon comes early in some ways when you're writing a book and you get hit there. What do you think is one of the key things to get past that?
I mean, I've never actually really got stuck at that point, so I can't really, at least not for a long time, not within living memory. But then I think the thing is, if you've got an idea of an ending, because he took, I want to talk about openings in a minute, and he said this book was inspired by an opening scene, and off he went. And for him, he's hitting that wall and then going back and saying, okay, I know where this is going now. So maybe, that's the thing that Michael Connelly does, which is to back up and then break through it. That's one way of doing it. For me, the big thing is if you've got a strong thematic idea, strong central dramatic argument, that always helps me break through any kind of block, because I sit back and I go, okay, let's go back to theme. What is this story actually about? What's the challenge for this character? And once I start noodling ideas about that, it comes pretty quickly. So I think if you've got an ending in mind, and if you've got a strong central dramatic argument, and by that I mean a theme posed as a question. So it could be, actually I've got one on my wall over there which says, should you surrender to desire? So that's a central dramatic argument of something I'm working on. Of course, most people would say, no, you don't surrender to desire. And then you see a biscuit and you think, oh, just one more biscuit. So it's one of these things where there's potential for drama there. So if you put people in the situation and you show them so if I'm stuck, I'm thinking, oh, okay, let's go back to theme. I need to, seduce them with some sort of desire. I need to tempt them with something. That's great. Suddenly, I'm back on track. So that helps me a lot.
That's interesting. And what you said about endings is so true as well. I think the ending can be a magnet in some ways that can draw you towards it. I think it'd be interesting. I'd love, if I was like a scientist and researched writing, what I would do is an experiment to see how many people that get stuck in that muddy middle don't actually have an ending or a strong enough ending. And is it the fact that they don't have that strong enough ending already thought through that they get stuck and then they get lost because there's nothing pulling them out the forest? They don't know where the exit is. And you can go around in circles. I've seen that happen so many times with a lot of writers where they do just end up turning in circles.
Your protagonist is often on a journey from A to Z. And, the Z is the opposite of A. So if you know what that end point is, then you'll be able to gauge how far along they are in that story of change. So that helps as well. That's why the ending helps so much, I think, because you're thinking, well, actually, they've got to be, if they're a hot mess at the beginning, they've got to have their life sorted out by the end. So how am I getting, how far along are they on that journey? What are the setbacks? What are the things they're having to overcome? How can I challenge them? What barrier can I put in their way to test them and make them stronger? So that's why the ending, having some idea of the ending, is really important.
Well, all I can say, folks, is to be continued. This is actually the kind of stuff we do in the Academy all the time.
Totally.
Isn't it? If you love this, if you love going deep on this kind of stuff, come and join us at the Academy, because we do coaching on this throughout the month, and there's always something new to learn about this. So do join us and just deepen your knowledge on this. It makes such a difference. You talked about openings as well, Mark.
Well, again, there's a whole course on this on the Academy, but I just found it fascinating that it was an opening scene that inspired him to write the rest of the book. And opening scenes are wonderful. They're so much fun to write because anything is possible. Absolutely anything is possible. And it's after that you need to start making story decisions and doors start getting closed. But I do encourage people to have as much fun as they can with an opening scene. And there's so many opportunities there because you're establishing things like the tone or the voice or a character or the world or the time. Figure out what's most important to your story and establish that in the opening. And just have really, really good fun with it. And it's a thing that will, and I think this is why Simon's books do so well, because they have these wonderful dramatic openings with great, turnarounds and reversals and surprises that people think, great, I'm on board. Because if you can surprise and enthrall someone with your opening chapter, they're going to think, the rest of the book is like this. Now, of course, the trick is to keep the rest of the book like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you can do that, and I don't necessarily mean having massive explosions or people on the run or whatever, but just make your opening chapter as much of a delight for the reader as possible. Delight them, surprise them, entice them. Don't open with someone brushing their teeth and getting out of bed and turning off the alarm clock or anything like that.
One thing I've noticed is I've got less and less patience for long, drawn out, boring chapter ones. I mean, it's just how I like to read. I'm not saying there isn't, space for that, but I think a really big opening chapter has so many different benefits, not just to keep the reader, but you're pitching the book to agents and publishers. They're going to have the same response as the reader. It's the bit that people will possibly read on Amazon because it's the first bit of the book. It's all of these benefits to making it absolutely brilliant. And it also, I think, helps set some kind of level of accountability to say, look, if I can open with this, can I keep it going? And you set a standard for yourself to write. Whereas if you write a really kind of slow, boring, and first chapter that bores you, you can't expect, one, you're going to have a real struggle trying to up the tempo. And secondly, how can you expect your readers to go along with the book? And so I think a rewrite of the first chapter, or just say, right, start and just, the first chapter I've written on this book I'm working on, it's kind of like up there with the old, double-decker bus going off a cliff in our book, Back to Reality. It's that kind of level of drama, like slapping them in the face, because it's like, well, that's what you need. That's what you've got to give them. And there's one thing I've learned from that podcast. It's about, you've got to grab people's attention from the outset and then hold it, obviously. But brilliant stuff. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Simon Beckett. If you, as Mark mentioned, his new book is out now. And if you would like to... if you would like to get involved in the 200 words a day challenge, we talk about the kind of consistency of writing. This is the beginning of the new year, and we've had lots of people sign up for the 200 word challenge. This is your time. You can sign up obviously at any point during the year, but it really is good to sign up as soon as you can to try and bank as many words over the year. People take a lot of focus on that. So if you're looking at building habits over the next year, 200wordchallenge.com. Pop along and join thousands of people who are doing this and helping themselves write their book, and hopefully creating this habit of a lifetime.
All of our social media this week is, funny enough, first week of January, is all about people jumping on board with 200 words, hashtag 200 words a day. I'm there. All sorts of people are there. It's Julian Barr, old friend of the podcast here. He tweeted on December 31st. He said, in 2021, I managed a 365-day writing streak for a grand total of 390,000 words, basically. He says, I'm grateful to the Bestseller Experiment for issuing the challenge to write 200 words a day. The habit of doing a little every day kept the momentum going, even on days when I didn't feel up to it. And that is exactly the point. And I love it. Julian got a congratulations from Mark Hood, the king of the writing streak.
He's been knighted by Mark Hood.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so big congrats on that, Julian. At the other end of the scale, Andrew Chapman, who is on Twitter as @AndyChapWriter, he tweeted this on the 2nd January. He said, I've written every day so far this year.
I love it.
He says, hopefully this is the beginning of a year-long streak. I'm pretty sure it will be, Andy. Do keep us posted on that.
That's amazing. But I just want to say well done to Julian Barr for joining the 365 Club, as it's now known. There's not many people that have done that, and it's quite. So I want to encourage Andy. Look, it's early days yet, but you can do it as well.
Absolutely. And Jeevani Chirika, who also writes as Rhoda Baxter and is on Twitter @Rhoda Baxter. She says, I'm doing this again this year. Weekdays only, weekends are a bonus. This challenge is what broke the pandemic-induced writing slump in 2020. 200 words is a nice, manageable daily goal. I often write more than that, but with this, I know I'll write at least 1,000 words a week. So best of luck with that, Jeeve. Got everything crossed for you. It's going to be amazing. And I'm doing it. I'm there every day. I've actually, friend of the podcast, Sage, she's also done a spreadsheet where you can keep track of your words. So I can put a link in the show notes to that.
That's on the Academy,
really
actually.
Cool.
You can get that as one of the resources on the Academy, which is great. But it's quite... we're finding that the simplest way to get going for anyone who's struggling or anyone who's got aspirations to get a book finished. I mean, if you look at the kind of figures you've just been talking about, I mean, Julie and I pushed out an average of just over 1,000 words a day, 1,068 words a day by doing the 200 words a day challenge. He got 5 times his investment back. You can't even get that with Bitcoin. Brilliant. And then even if you're just doing 200 words a day, that is a novel in a year. That is like 70 to 80,000 words a year, which is the average length of a novel, which is why the 200 word challenge exists. It is linked to that book in a year. So, if you think you haven't got the time to be a writer, you may as well quit or do the 200 word challenge, because that is the thing. That's the thing that will get you through the year. So we'll see you on the other side, 200wordchallenge.com. And then we want to hear your stories and updates as to how it's changed your writing life, because it's been quite phenomenal, hasn't it, Mark? I mean, over the last year alone, the amount of stories we've heard.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
Folks, if you want to get in touch, come and find us on social media. Facebook is Bestseller Experiment. Twitter and Instagram is @BestsellerXP, or pop along to the website, bestsellerexperiment.com. There's a contact tab there. You can drop us a line. We answer all our emails. And if you've enjoyed this episode, pop along to your podcatcher of choice. Give us a rating, preferably a nice rating, because that helps us make us more visible. We can help more writers. We can all get voices out there that haven't been heard before. We get all those stories told. That's what we are all about.
Brilliant stuff. And if you would like to try the Bestseller Academy with Mark and I, come and join us. Try it for 30 days. You can come along and try it for 30 days, get a taster of it, see if it's for you. Join us for some live coaching this month on both life coaching for writers and craft coaching. Plus meet some incredible writers who are very, very like-minded. One of my favorite things about the Academy is all the amazing people that we've got in it. So come and be a part of this amazing community. Pop over to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. And Mr. State, I look forward to hearing more about your adventures over the coming weeks. I know there's a lot happening, a lot of stuff you can't share.
Some big news next week. Fingers crossed, some very big news next week. Yeah.
So stay tuned, folks. This is going to be a very interesting year. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2.
Goodbye.
Bye.